and Leon Wolf, managing editor of The Blaze. Leon, let me start with you. I've been sort of following with some fascination conservative reaction to this court opening. You know, the Republican Party is an anti-abortion party almost entirely. That's a sort of consensus view. The legal stars of the conservative movement, the Republican Party, are opposed to abortion. Many think that Roe was terribly decided and sloppy. And then all of a sudden, everyone gets bizarrely quiet when the opportunity is up for a Supreme Court justice who would presumably provide the fifth vote to overturn Roe. And I don't quite get it. Is it just politics? Is it fear of the politics of it?
Well, look, Chris, I'm in my early 40s, and I remember the Robert Bork confirmation hearings. And so anybody who's my age or older, which includes everybody in the United States Senate right now, is not going to go through that again. They're just not. You know, I think that, you know, the precedent was set that, you know, a judge's ideology can be enough to torpedo them. And so I think that's the lesson that the GOP took away for probably 2 or 3 generations when it comes to this fight. And, you know, it is kind of a sad and unfortunate effect of the way that Roe versus Wade, I think, poisons our national politics. I mean, I know a lot of people who are confused as to how anybody could vote for Donald Trump. I mean, I didn't vote for him, but I understand why people did. And it's because they feel democratically shut out of having a voice in the abortion issue until, you know, it goes away in terms of the SCOTUS. And so that's where we are.
What do you think of that, Erin?
Well, I mean, where do I start? Don't ask, don't tell is alive and well. There is an enormous amount of gaslighting happening right now, where the reason that Donald Trump became president was based in part on his explicit promises, and these were unprecedented promises, to appoint justices that would, in his words, automatically overturn Roe v. Wade. So the kind of innocence that we're seeing this week, where people are claiming that it's scaremongering to fear that a justice appointed by Trump to replace Kennedy would in any way have anything to do with Roe v. Wade, I mean, this is a political transaction that took place in the open. The head of the Susan B. Anthony list said in January 2016, don't vote for Trump. We can't rely on him when it comes to Roe v. Wade, only to then co-head his pro-life advisory council on the basis that he had promised her to appoint quote-unquote pro-life judges. So the idea that these activists who faithfully turned out for Trump, who so far he has delivered on his promises for, are not going to get what they want. Now, what we're going to see is more of a kind of, you know, stealth language around Roe. We're not going to see people who have been as explicit as Bork, or perhaps as explicit as Ruth Bader Ginsburg when it comes to their ideas about reproductive freedom. But there is absolutely no question that Gorsuch, Roberts, and anyone who is appointed to replace Kennedy, if Trump appoints someone and they are confirmed by the Senate, they are gunning for Roe. It's only a question of how explicit will they be, how long will they take to get there, what legal theory they'll use. But this is something that the right has been working on for 45 years, and they have finally gotten their chance.
Look, I will note that Leon's last point about people feeling democratically shut out, and that's the Roe poisoning the system that way and people getting mobilizing, is not at all inconsistent with what you're saying, Erin. I mean, that is exactly the point. Like, the anti-abortion movement in this country is incredibly mobilized, incredibly strong, for precisely the reason that they genuinely they want to see abortion banned. Yeah, that is why
Ruth Bader Ginsburg agrees with Leon. She would have preferred that it was that it was left to the states. Right. But we also have 45 years of precedent and people who have organized their lives around legal abortion. And we also have conservatives on the Supreme Court who have voted to uphold federal bans. So the notion that this is about states' rights is pretty disingenuous when you have Republicans introducing a nationwide 20-week ban just this year.
Nancy, you're a former federal judge. You were a district court judge, and I wonder how you think about this. When there seems like this crazy ball hiding with every sort of judicial confirmation battle, where extremely smart, sophisticated people who spent lots of time thinking about issues pretend that like none of it's ever occurred to them, and they're all blank slates, and it drives me insane.
Well, I mean, I think it's a more complicated situation. First of all, it didn't begin with Bork. You know, Louis Brandeis was seriously attacked way back when. So Bork was our most recent memory of that. But there've been political battles for a long time. Maybe one way to look at it, you know, I was confirmed by the Senate as well. One way to look at it is there's a range of reasonable positions that a judge can take. And there's no question that when a president is elected, he will pick his range. And then there are, as we argued about Bork, people outside the range, people whose positions are not within the mainstream, people who are sort of willy-nilly going to overturn precedent. And I think that within the range, you're right. It's hide the ball. It's a kabuki ritual. You don't want to talk about it. But the people who are outside the range, those are the ones we have to be talking about. What makes Trump different is that I have never before heard of a president that had a slate. It's like treating the bench, treating the judiciary like you would who's going to be my vice president. I have a slate of candidates. That's never been done before.
Yeah, both the sort of explicit promise and the slate of candidates, which Leon,
right.
I think Leon helped him with conservatives. These are the five that they're saying are in the short list now: Thomas Hardiman, Raymond Kethledge, Amol Thupper, and Amy Coney Barrett, and of course Brett Kavanaugh, who many people think or have been talking about for forever. Let me ask you this, Leon: you have David Souter, you've got Sandra Day O'Connor, you've got Anthony Kennedy. All three appointed by Republicans, all three voting to uphold the core holding of Roe. If that happened, if Donald Trump were to appoint a justice who would vote to uphold the core holding of Roe, would conservatives feel angry and betrayed?
Oh, I mean, I think you only have to look back to 1992. I think that was one of the key elements that led to George H.W. Bush being defeated, that and the tax hike. I think those are the two things that as a Republican president you cannot do, which is, number one, raise taxes, and number two, appoint a liberal justice to the Supreme Court. In previous years, but it's become such a people on both sides of this great ditch throwing lava at each other that anymore I don't think that that's going to happen. And I let me
just,
who are concerned.
Just to hear you, hold on a second. When you say not going to happen, what do you mean won't happen?
Well, I mean, I just think if he does it, I do think that he runs the risk of maybe somebody like John Kasich getting traction as a third-party candidate, kind of what happened in 1992, some independent coming up and taking 10% of the vote, throwing it to the Democrats or whatever the situation is. I don't think that he'll lose in the Republican primary, but I do think that it'll hurt his general election chances. I agree.
Nancy, what were you going to say?
I want to back off for a moment. We are talking about a right that the court has been picking at and undermining and limiting for the longest time. So what's really in the winds here is, are we going to make abortion criminal again? That's what Roe v. Wade now stands for, because to some degree it is the least protected right in the lexicon at this point. So I also suggest that we're not, it's really more than Roe v. Wade, although that's what this discussion is about. The next Supreme Court is going to have to deal with issues of presidential power. If the Mueller investigation winds up challenging the president, there's going to be issues of presidential power in addition to affirmative action, et cetera. So, I mean, it's a much more complicated discussion.
Yeah, Erin Carmone, Nancy Gertner, and Leon Wolf, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Coming up, the resistance shows no sign of slowing down as the Trump administration replaces